Based on my reading on the Confucius Institute and my studying of Chinese foreign policy operations, this has become reasonably standard, that there's an effort, first off, to start with the soft sell approach. Ironically, I think playing on Canada's growing awareness around issues of race and racism and saying, oh, wait, how could you possibly question the motives of us, a poor developing country, trying to make our way in the world, and all we're seeking to do is to share love and harmony and understanding through dance, through language, through music. Underneath that, there's a harsher reality. And we've seen that harsher reality, of course, in the way that China has actually behaved. But specifically on your question, I didn't find it surprising. I did find it disappointing that a former premier would choose to present the views of a clearly hostile foreign power that has been actively engaged in suppressing its own citizens and also arbitrarily detaining Canadians, of course, as we're well aware. So I find it depressing, perhaps not surprising, but hopefully things can change. I'm always an optimist.
So could you talk to us a little bit about that meeting, that conversation, and if there's any follow-up subsequently to that in any other kind of venue with Chinese embassy officials?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Consul General from Montreal arrived and gather also had meetings with other ministers and made it quite clear that there could be economic consequences for any erosion of ties between the government of New Brunswick and China, including threats around lobster sales and a number of other specifics. But when in my conversation with him, it started off with he clearly hadn't done much background reading on where I'd come from, and I've just had a range of publications that are easily accessible online around China democracy issues ranging back about 15 years. And his first goal was to make it again sound as though this was simply a misunderstanding. And he repeatedly said, look, the way you should really come and allay any concerns you have is come and visit China. You can come, we'll be happy. We're going to show you around. We'll show you a great time. And you'll see that China is in fact a democratic country, which I expressed some surprise on hearing that. And basically continued along those lines. And there was a significant pushback when I made the point that you made in your line of questioning, saying that for a country that is routinely willing to, on the first instance of receiving any criticism, say that this is an interference in our internal affairs, in our domestic affairs, and violates the rights of national self-determination and the autonomy of the state. When I questioned how this didn't apply, he said, well, this is about schools. I said, well, that's odd because this is about schools and we were talking about lobsters as well. So there seems to be a little bit of a mixed message here. But that, again, didn't particularly surprise me because if you read the reports that have come from our own intelligence services, from the Australian government, from other democratic governments around the world, including some emergent democracies that are far further down the GDP list than we are, but are increasingly awake and aware to what China is up to, that this is part of the pattern. Is you start off with the soft sell, you start off with the all expense paid trips. And I don't think it's any coincidence that we see a large number of Western politicians suddenly parroting Beijing's line on a multitude of different issues, because most of those folks have taken advantage of Chinese hospitality. And then the next stage up from that is the veiled threat. Well, if you do this, then even though this is purely about education, inexplicably lobsters become part of New Brunswick's education system. And even though this has nothing to do with the Communist Party or the government, this is all about a very informal education exchange. Again, Beijing could be willing to make decisions around its economic relationship with Canada based on what happened here in New Brunswick. And so the efforts to threaten and cajole, I don't think they would have been acceptable from anyone else. And I can only imagine the horror with which most folks in Canada, myself included, would react if we ever had representatives of the American government behaving in a similar way. And I'm not surprised. This is part of a traditional pattern. But again, my hope is that through conversations like this, we can move to recognize the threat that China poses and move quickly to try and distance ourselves from a country that does not share our values.